So, first of all, we want to define the differences between society and culture, or one potential definition of the two. Again, this becomes important when we're talking about the differences between British anthropology and American anthropology. We look at culture as a whole. They look at society as a series of elements that then work together. So a society is a social grouping characterizing humans and other social animals. Bees have societies, but they don't have culture. They don't produce art. They don't produce literature. They don't make any movies. They make honey. That's all they do. A culture is that entirety of art and drama and music and poetry and prose and all of this stuff, dance and dress and makeup and aesthetics and what's beautiful and what isn't. That's all part of what makes a culture. So that's, when we use those two terms, that's what we're talking about. Ethics are values that pertain to human conduct. They are what determines what is right and what is wrong as far as actions, or whether it is good or it is bad. Generally, when we talk about ethics, they are codified, they are listed, they are put together as a code, as a series of statements that define the ethics of a particular field. Medicine has a code of ethics, law has a code of ethics, we have a code of ethics. And again, one of the reasons we have this code of ethics is because of our checkered history. Anthropology was crucial in understanding how to kill off and imprison the Indians. They were crucial for understanding how the colonizers could work with the colonized. Right? And so, especially since the mid-1960s, we've done everything we can to go around, to reverse the damage we may have done in the past. And one of the ways we do this is by having this standard set of ethics. And we all try to adhere to it. And we do what we can. So let's take a look at what that code of ethics actually says. So first, this is from the American Anthropological Association. It is the statement of professional, or the principles of professional responsibility. I often just refer to it as the ethics statement, and we go from there. It was revised, I think, the last time in May 2012. It may have had one revision since then, but not enough to worry about. And the first one, as I said, and this is the same as the first one for doctors, for lawyers, for almost every profession, is do no harm. Just don't mess anything up. Your first and primary objective when you're in the field is to protect your sources. Not protect them in the same way that a journalist does, but protect them in that you don't put them in any form of risk. You don't put them at risk legally. I mean, you could be doing a study of drug dealers. Well, printing their name and address is putting them at risk, right? But they're breaking the law. Don't care. Ethics is separate from legality and morality, right? And you have to apply, in an ethical situation, the ethics that apply. Safeguard the informant's rights, interests, sensitivities. One of the ways we do this on a large study is through what we refer to as the IRB, the Institutional Review Board. Now, when you work at a large university or even a small school, and you want to go out in the field and do research, almost every school, every business that does field research, every nonprofit that does field research, they run you through an institutional review board process. And what that is doing is trying to make sure that you're doing no harm. They generally are written for patients in medical studies. We use the same one when we're doing field work. Now, some of the questions then don't always apply because they're looking at patients' rights. But we also deal with at-risk populations. An at-risk population is a population that doesn't have full control over their lives, right? So minors, right? Some of you want to be teachers when you grow up. And so you want to do your observation in a school setting. That's fine, but you can't identify those kids. Nothing in your ethnography should say, that's Danny, I found him, right? You have to mask their identities. And there are a bunch of ways you can do that. Just give them a different name. Don't describe where they sit in the classroom or what the classroom is. Give them a different name. Combine three people that are kind of similar into an aggregate person with a new name. As long as you identify, I'm using fake names. Or In some cases, I've taken multiple students and combined them into one because it's just easier in telling the story, but they're representative. This is representative of what happened, right? So as long as you are upfront with what you're doing, you can use those to mask them. But what would be some other at-risk populations? Juvenile, again, minors. So any minors. So minors are one. What's another one? Crim majors. What's one you can think of off the top of your head? Who doesn't have control over their life dealing with criminology? Prisoners, right? They don't have any control over their life. And so, again, they are an at-risk population. What about immigrants? Right? Especially undocumented immigrants. Are there other groups you can think of that would be at-risk populations?
Patients in a healthcare setting?
Yes, exactly. All of the HIPAA stuff has to be applied, right? And again, the IRB is usually geared to medical research, so we have to skip a whole big portion when we do it. But again, it is so that we don't do any harm. And again, depending on the situation, it could be women, depending on the situation. If you're going to an Arabic country, obviously women are an at-risk population. There are lots and lots of things. So, if you're dealing with people who are breaking the law, you're doing drug dealers in the barrio, right? You cannot put their identifying information out. You're doing the prostitutes that the one person I was talking about are doing. You can't put their names. You don't even want to list what hotel they're at because it puts them at risk. So you have to really think about your subjects and put their needs first. Because if you don't, your study's not going to last very long, for one. The benefits of your research must outweigh the risks. If the risks are greater than the benefits, the study's not worth doing. Secondly, be open and honest regarding your work. Do not tell your subjects, I'm doing this study, when you're actually doing that, right? Well, if I tell them what I'm really doing, they're not going to give me the right answers. They're going to give me what they think I want to hear, right? So I'm going to trick them. I'm going to tell them I'm doing this, and then I'm going to look at this. You can't do that. It's completely against our ethical standing. You go into a community, you tell them what you're doing and why. And if they're welcoming you, they're welcoming you. If they don't, live with it. So you must make sure that you are open and honest and transparent going in. This is one of the reasons why the consent form is going to be different with every observation. Every different study is going to have a slightly different consent form, right? The one that you saw in the video, it said in that form, if I know you're going to hurt somebody, I have to inform them. Mine doesn't have that in there because I'm not dealing with drug dealers or at-risk populations. I'm dealing with minority populations, but I'm not dealing necessarily with at-risk populations. So I don't have that particular concern, right? But that honesty has to go all the way through to the end, right? Every interaction with your subjects must be completely open and honest. No plagiarism, no making shit up, right? There are ways that you can mask people by combining into a new figure, but you have to, a new persona, but you have to identify that that's what you've done, right? Everything you do has to be visible. Show your work. Your subjects must be willing participants in your study. Now, if you're just observing people from across the room, it's public. But the moment you start asking for interviews, the moment you start getting into people's heads, into people's lives, into their relationships, they must come first, and that means that they must give you specific permission. And we do that, and this is also part of the Institutional Review Board process, the IRB. We do this by using a consent form. And in that consent form, it should say at the minimum that by signing this form, you're giving the researcher permission to record information about you that you then will share within the academy, right? It'll be made available in the library for other researchers to use, that people are going to use it for research and for expanding knowledge and telling their story. They're not going to be making money off of it. This is research. And once they consent, then you can do your interviews, you can ask them questions, write all this stuff down. But what happens if halfway through the study they go, you know what, remember that consent form? I don't want to do this no more. What happens? What do you think happened? Sorry, what? You withdraw. You give them back that consent form, and you delete their interviews, and you just forget everything that you got from them. You can't use it, right? They withdrew the consent. It is a protection for you as a researcher, because that on there will be the contacts back to the IRB, so that if you mess up, they can contact the university or the nonprofit that you're working for. And that they have control over their property, which is their story, right? And if they decide, you know what, I'm not comfortable telling that story, then take it out. I'll give you a great example. Years ago, when I was first doing the Cooksey interviews, I took a number of undergrads from here at Fresno State. We went up to Sacramento, where a number of the Cooksey family was now living, and we dropped off students at different homes, and we went in and did extensive whole life interviews or oral histories. And one of the students, named Scott Peterson, the only reason I remember that is because that was when Scott Peterson had killed his wife, different Scott Peterson. He hated the fact that Scott Peterson killed his wife. But, because every time his name came up, he said, oh, yeah, no, not the same one. But anyway, so Scott, who's a great guy, went and interviewed one of she would be the third generation of Cookseys in that community. So there were the children of slaves, then their children, and she would be the next generation. And before the interview started, they just chatted. And that's often a way to do it. You get your recorder set up, and you get your notepad out, and you're talking, and you're just trying to build a rapport. And during that period, she tells him about, when she got pregnant when she was 15, how bad it was, and how there were, the family initially was kind of rejecting, but then, some of the relatives were much more in tune with the teachings of the church, and they embraced her and brought her back in, and it goes on and on and on, and he goes, I can't wait to record this story. This is going to be a great story, right? Signs the form, turns on the tape recorder, goes to do the interview. He can't pull her into that story. He keeps trying. He specifically asked her to talk about when she was 15 and got pregnant, and she won't do it. She talks about other stuff. He was so frustrated. When we came by and picked him up on the other end, he comes out of the house, he gets in the car, gets in the back seat, pulls the door, he goes, I got nothing. What do you mean? And he tells me the story about what happened. And I said, well, transcribe it, bring me the audio, bring me the typed out version of it, and we'll see. Well, if it was the only interview that we had done on Cookseyville, it was nothing. But she was able, in what little she said, to confirm and verify stuff in a bunch of the other interviews. So we were able to do what we call triangulation. There's a fact here, there's another fact here that says the same thing. Let's put the two together, right? And so we were able then to use her interview basically to confirm a lot of other people's interviews, right? So she consented, but she didn't consent for the stuff before she signed. It was only after. So we've never been able to use that. I've never been able to use any of that story that he was so excited about and not able to get. Competing ethical obligations do collaborators interfere with parties. Very often, one ethical consideration will be here and another one will be here, and you've got to find a way to balance them. This was what makes this really hard. That's why I've given you 5 or 6 different case studies to look at, because the ethics apply differently in different conditions, and you have to balance it. You have to balance it between a lot of different people. Your subjects. If it was Jenny or me, we have to worry about our students, right? If you go with me this weekend to the field, I have to consider where you're at, right? I have to take you into consideration. My colleagues, the other professors here on campus, I have to make sure that I'm not doing something that would be damaging to them. My employer and my funder, right? I'm not funded right now, so I don't have to worry about that, but I do have to work within the structure of Fresno State. I work here, I represent the university, and if I'm really screwing up, that reflects back on the university, others as well. The obligation, though, to the research participants, to your subjects, is really the number one. It is primary, almost always, especially if they are an at-risk population. Number 5, make your results accessible, especially to the people that you're studying, right? Too often, and we all are guilty of this to some level, and I've been guilty of it too. I haven't shared as much as I'd like to. But you go in, you do the study, you write it up, you go out and you publish it, but you never take it back to the community, right? Take it back. Go back to the people that you're studying and say, this is your story. This is what I got. How wrong is it, right? Sometimes it's wrong. Sometimes it's right. But they are part of doing the research is sharing the research. I give probably 3 public talks a year around the valley in different places just because it's my obligation to keep sharing that material with the community. Number 6, protect and preserve your records. Saw a study 2 years ago. 80% of all research records for every single study, scientific, humanities, and social sciences, since 1980, 80% of the raw data is lost. It's either on floppy disks nobody can read, it's on zip drives, the old zip drives with the weird little mechanical disks in them, or they're on hard drives that nobody can read, or they just got lost. So we have the studies, but we don't have the raw data, right? When everything was done on paper, until the rats got into it, we still had the results. We had the raw data. Electronically, it's too easy to lose it. And so backing up your records, making sure that the institution you work at has copies, these are all really, really important. And finally, maintain respectful and ethical professional relationships with everyone involved, with your students, with your colleagues, with your clients, with your evaluator, with your reviewer, with your supervising staff, with your subjects. That you always treat them with respect and ethically.